AMD's been hard at work behind the scenes trying to sell you Zen 5. Since its disappointing release just 2 months ago now, we've received a new version of Windows with Zen-specific optimizations. There's been countless BIOS updates, new power profiles, alleged memory improvements, and some price cuts. All of this has come together to make Zen 5 better. Or has it? Well, we're going to go find out. Now, earlier this week, I compared the Ryzen 7 9700X with the 2.5-year-old Ryzen 7 5800X 3D in a range of games using the official public release of Windows 11 24H2, along with the latest AGESA code from AMD. In short, the 5800X 3D was only slightly slower than the 9700X, so an impressive result for the Zen 3 processor, but this wasn't exactly buying advice, as you can't buy the 5800X 3D anymore, though you can still get the 5700X 3D for around $200, which is an exceptional deal. That said though, it really does only make sense if you're already on the AM4 platform, given the newer Ryzen 7 7700X can still be found for as low as $245 US. It offers a similar level of performance and again is on the newer platform. And it's the 7700X along with the non-X version that has really been a thorn in the 9700X's side, largely due to the much cheaper prices of those Zen 4 parts and of course the lackluster Zen 5 performance. You see, the 9700X launched at an MSRP of $360 US, which at first seems like a nice little discount from the $400 US MSRP of the 7700X. That's until you realize that the 9700X really should have been called the 9700 and come at an MSRP of $330 US, given it is a 65 watt part, though it doesn't come with a cooler like the 7700 did. But never mind, as usual, AMD got there in the end, or they're almost there, discounting the 9700X shortly after reviews went live. You'd think they'd just lead with that, especially after getting it wrong the last half dozen or so times, but whatever, some things just never seem to change. But still, in this example, it doesn't change too much, given that you can still buy a 7700X for between $245 and $290 US, which amounts to a decent saving. But even so, the 9700X is certainly more appealing than it was at launch, at the new $330 US price. And helping the attractiveness of the 9700X would be better gaming performance, and AMD's hoping this is exactly what the Windows branch prediction optimizations will deliver. So today we're comparing the 9700X with the 7700X and the 7700 non-X in a range of games using the latest build of Windows 11, so 24H2, using the latest AGESA 1.2.0.2 BIOS revision. Now, I'm not going to enable the optional 105 watt TDP mode for the 9700X, as that's just like enabling PBO. So rather, I've included the 7700, so the 65 watt Zen 4 part, for a comparison with the 65 watt Zen 5 part. I'm also not testing on an X870E motherboard, as X870E and X670E are technically the exact same thing. X870E just makes USB 4 support mandatory via a third-party controller. So again, I can't stress this enough. I know a lot of people like to argue this point, but AMD have fooled you. They have simply renamed X670E to X870E. Then there's the DDR5 8000 support, which isn't exclusive to Zen 5. You can also run DDR5 8000 on Zen 4. That is assuming you have a motherboard that can do it, and I found despite AMD claiming X870 motherboards are ideal for DDR5 8000 memory, most of them can't actually do it, failing inside of a 1-hour stress test. And I will have a detailed video on this in the coming weeks, once I finish testing every last X870/X870E motherboard. So with a small discount, BIOS updates, and a new version of Windows 11, how does the gaming performance of the 9700X compare to that of the 7700 and 7700X? Well, to find out, I've updated our review data, so this unfortunately isn't a 40 plus game benchmark, but instead it's a 14 game benchmark based on the games that we're using for upcoming Zen 5 X 3D and Intel Arrow Lake reviews. So let's get into it. First up, we have Star Wars Jedi Survivor. And here the 9700X averaged 161 FPS, making it 4% faster than the 7700X and 7% faster than the 7700, which isn't an amazing result, but better than what we've come to expect from Zen 5. This is also similar performance to that of the 5800X 3D, though it is a little over 20% slower than the 7800X 3D. Testing with The Last of Us Part 1 sees the 9700X lead the 7700X by a mere 2% margin, while it was less than 1% faster than the 7700X. So we're talking less than 3 frames at over 170 FPS. You could also safely conclude that in this example, the 9700X, 7700X, and 7700 all deliver the same level of performance. Although Windows 11 24H2 dramatically boosts performance in Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty, we find that Zen 4 and Zen 5 scale fairly evenly, and in fact, with the official release of this operating system, we found that the Zen 4 parts were a few frames faster. But again, performance overall was near enough to call identical. 24H2 also improved performance in Hogwarts Legacy. Here the 9700X is able to deliver, on average, 125 FPS, making it a single frame faster than the 7700X and 4 FPS faster than the 7700, so a 3% uplift there. ACC was a major outlier in our original review, and that's still the case here. The 9700X is able to more closely match the 5800X 3D thanks to that larger L1 cache, making it around 20% faster than the Zen 4 models without 3D V-cache. So that is a big performance uplift, but sadly, this data is an outlier, and it isn't really seen in any other games that we've come across yet. That said though, the 9700X is also quite handy in Remnant too, averaging 126 FPS, allowing it to beat the 7700 by 13% and the 7700X by 10%. So a good result here, and certainly much better than what we've seen in most of the other titles tested so far. Next up we have Homeworld 3, and here the 9700X is back to delivering 7700X-like performance with 93 FPS on average, which is a mere 3% uplift from the 7700 non-X. This is also comparable performance to the 5800X 3D, so nothing to get too excited about here. Next we have A Plague Tale Requiem, and here we're also looking at very similar performance between the 9700X, 7700X, and 7700, with the 9700X just 4% faster than the 7700 on average. The 9700X is a little more impressive in Counter-Strike 2, allowing for 526 FPS on average, which is a 6% improvement from the 7700, though just 2% faster than the 7700X. As found in our day one review, the 9700X is still very underwhelming, you could say weak even, in Starfield, allowing for just 102 FPS to be rendered, opposed to 111 FPS for the 7700, making the Zen 4 part 9% faster. A new and very CPU demanding game that we've added to our CPU reviews is Space Marine 2, and in this example, the 9700X is delivering 7700/7700X-like performance with 108 FPS. That's a mere 2% improvement over the 7700 non-X, so similar margins to what we've seen in most games so far. The 9700X is also comparable to the 7700 in Hitman 3, and performance overall is very good, but relative to Zen 4, it's rather underwhelming. The 9700X was faster than both the 7700X and 7700 in Watch Dogs Legion, by up to a 3% margin, so in other words, near enough to identical results here. Finally, we have Star Wars Outlaws, and once again the 9700X is found to deliver 7700/7700X-like performance with 128 FPS in our benchmark. Finally, here's the average data, calculated using the GeoMean. Across the 14 games tested, the 9700X was just 2% faster than the 7700X, which is slightly down on the 3% margin found in our day one review, using a slightly different range of games. When comparing 65-watt parts, we see that the 9700X is 4% faster than the 7700, so pretty close to that Zen 5% we've all come to expect, which is again disappointing given all the talk about improved Zen 5 performance, but also, I guess at this point, it's hardly surprising. Now here's a closer look at how that 4% margin is derived with big wins in ACC and Remnant 2. But if we remove the ACC result, which we know to be an outlier, the 9700X ends up being just 2% faster than the 7700. But of course, even at 4%, they are very evenly matched. The only poor result for the 9700X can be seen in Starfield, though one might argue that gains of 5% or less are also very poor for a new CPU generation after 2 years. So there you have it. Sadly, nothing's really changed, at least not relative to Zen 4. Without question, Zen 5 has improved since release, so that is technically correct to say. It's a little bit cheaper as well, and thanks to those Windows optimizations, yeah, it's a little bit faster. But again, it's not faster relative to Zen 4. And in fact, I really do question just how much of this uplift we're seeing from the Windows 11 update is down to those supposed Ryzen branch prediction optimizations. To me, it seems more likely that there's security mitigations that were hastily patched into Windows 11, they ended up hurting performance, and 24H2 goes about addressing these mitigations in a more optimized way, which is why we've also seen performance improvements for Intel. Whatever the case though, it's true, Ryzen processors have seen performance improvements in games with 24H2. Some games did see massive gains, others more mild gains, and some no gains at all, but overall, they are faster, and again, I can't stress this enough, these gains also apply to Zen 4 processors and even Zen 3 processors in some examples. So that's it really. As it stands today for gaming, you can expect anywhere in the region of a 2 to maybe 5% performance uplift for the 9700X on average when compared to comparable Zen 4 parts. And this variance depends on the games used, of course. So if you can snag a 7700X for $245 US, which is the going rate over on Amazon at the time of making this video, you'd obviously get that given it's around 25% cheaper than the 9700X. That said, it does appear as though stock is drying up over in the US, as major retailers such as Newegg are currently sold out. Over here in Australia, you're looking at having to pay around $600 Australian for a 9700X, whereas the 7700X can be had for just under $500. Locally, it's about a 20% saving to go with the Zen 4 part, and I'm of course quoting the local currency here, so dollary dues. Therefore, until we reach a point in time where parts like the 9700X are down around the current asking prices of comparable Zen 4 models, there's not much to get excited about here. And even then, it's a business as usual type situation, because as I've previously noted, if you desired this level of CPU gaming performance and were willing to spend around $330 US in order to acquire it, you could have just bought a Ryzen 7 7700 back in January of 2023. That's almost 2 years ago now. And then we saw it cost as little as $250 US in January of this year. So that's some 10 months ago now. Anyway, I'd better get back to benchmarking. I have a lot of CPUs that I need to get updated data for, so we can use that to gauge the performance of upcoming parts from both AMD and Intel. If you enjoyed this video, you know what to do, subscribe. We also have the join button now if you want to become a Hardware Unboxed member. There's also, or alternatively, there is Patreon. You can sign up to that and you get access, well, both give you access to our exclusive Discord server. There's some other things in there like behind the scenes content. We do Q&A stuff. A lot of cool things there. If you want to be a Hardware Unboxed member, check it out. If not, that is perfectly fine. And I would like to thank you for watching this video. I'm your host, Steve. See you again next time.